The world of modern warfare is full of surprises, but few could have predicted what Sweden's Gripen E was about to unleash upon NATO. In the shadows of diplomatic talks and silent military exercises, something was brewing that no one had truly anticipated. The Gripen wasn't just another fighter jet. It was a message carved into the skies, a secret that would stun even the most powerful alliances. NATO, with all its resources, satellites, and intelligence networks, had underestimated Sweden's ability to reshape the battlefield. It began quietly. A series of test flights over Scandinavia caught the attention of a few analysts, but most dismissed it as routine. NATO was focused elsewhere, on Eastern Europe, on the Mediterranean, on global crises. Yet beneath the snow-capped mountains of Sweden, engineers and pilots were pushing the Gripen into realms no Western analyst could fully grasp. This wasn't about raw speed or brute force. It was about intelligence, adaptability, and an almost ghost-like presence in the sky. The Gripen had always been known as the underdog, the smaller, cheaper alternative to the giants like the Eurofighter Typhoon or the American F-35. NATO considered it capable, but never truly threatening. But what no one saw coming was the transformation. The new Gripen E wasn't simply an upgrade. It was a complete redefinition of air power. With an electronic warfare suite so advanced it could blind enemy radars, with data fusion so seamless it felt like the jet could see the future, and with the ability to operate in environments where others would falter, it was unlike anything NATO had prepared for. In secret exercises, Swedish pilots demonstrated maneuvers that baffled even seasoned observers. The Gripen could jam advanced radar systems, slip past detection nets, and feed false information into NATO's own command centers. It wasn't just flying. It was rewriting the rules of aerial dominance. Each simulation revealed a disturbing truth. NATO's assumptions about air superiority were crumbling. Rumors began to spread in closed circles. Analysts whispered about how a Gripen squadron had defeated simulated NATO defenses in record time. There were stories of a NATO surveillance plane unable to track the Swedish jet, as if the Gripen had vanished into thin air. Documents marked classified began to circulate, raising urgent questions. How had Sweden, a relatively small nation, pulled this off? Was the Gripen E just a fighter jet, or was it the future of warfare itself? The real shock came during a joint NATO drill. Sweden, invited to participate as a partner, deployed the Gripen E in what was supposed to be a friendly exercise. But what unfolded left commanders speechless. Within minutes, NATO's top aircraft were caught in a trap of electronic illusions. Their radars showed enemies where none existed. Their communications were scrambled. Their formations broke down in confusion. And in the chaos, the Gripens eliminated targets with chilling precision. Pilots returned, shaken. One commander was reported to have said, "It was like fighting ghosts. We didn't stand a chance. NATO's pride, jets worth hundreds of millions, backed by some of the most advanced military infrastructure on Earth, had been humbled by a fleet that cost a fraction of the price." But the deeper question lingered. If Sweden could humiliate NATO in an exercise, what did that mean for the balance of power in Europe? What secrets were hidden in the heart of the Gripen systems? And if this was just the demonstration, what would happen in real combat? This was not just about a fighter jet anymore. It was about fear. Fear of the unknown, of a weapon so advanced that even the most powerful alliance in the world was left guessing. NATO had been shocked. not only by the Gripen's performance, but by the realization that they had been blind to its rise. And as whispers spread through the corridors of Brussels and Washington, one truth became impossible to ignore. No one saw this coming. The silence in those command rooms was telling. Questions remained unanswered. NATO had faced a challenge it never expected, and the Gripen had rewritten the script of modern warfare. Yet what lay ahead was even more mysterious. The story wasn't over. It had only just begun. The aftermath of the NATO drill was chaotic. Reports flooded in from different command posts, each describing the same unsettling reality. Sweden's Gripen E had not just performed well. It had exposed a terrifying weakness in NATO's own systems. Meetings were called in haste. Generals and analysts demanded answers, and intelligence officers scrambled to piece together how such a seemingly small air force could have humiliated the largest military alliance on the planet. Inside a closed briefing room, senior NATO officials replayed footage from the exercise. On the screens, the chaos was undeniable. Radars flashing false signals, pilots struggling to lock onto targets, command centers receiving conflicting data. The Gripen E moved like a phantom, striking with precision, and then vanishing before any response could be organized. One analyst muttered under his breath, "This isn't a fighter jet." "This is something else." Questions echoed through the halls of NATO command. Was this an isolated success, or had Sweden unlocked a formula that could tilt the balance of global air power? If the Gripen E could blind and confuse NATO forces in a controlled drill, what would happen in the chaos of a real war? Could their trillion-dollar defense systems be rendered useless by a jet designed in a country that was not even a NATO member until recently? The most alarming discovery came from electronic warfare logs. Analysts realized that the Gripen had infiltrated NATO's networks in ways they had never encountered before. It wasn't just jamming signals. It was planting false data, creating illusions, making NATO forces fight shadows. For the first time, the alliance realized that its greatest vulnerability wasn't hardware, but trust in its own information systems. Commanders debated furiously. Some dismissed the events as anomalies, insisting NATO still held overwhelming superiority. Others weren't so sure. They pointed out that Sweden had achieved this without the massive budgets of the US or the sprawling resources of larger European powers. If Sweden could do this, what about other nations watching quietly from the sidelines? In Stockholm, meanwhile, officials remained silent. No grand declarations, no boasts. The Swedish Air Force carried on as though nothing unusual had happened. But insiders hinted at something chilling. What NATO had witnessed was only a fraction of the Gripen's true potential. The full capabilities, they whispered, were still hidden, kept in reserve for the day they would truly be needed. For NATO, the shock ran deeper than military pride. It was about the realization that the future of warfare might not belong to the biggest armies or the costliest jets. It might belong to nations that could outthink, outmaneuver, and outsmart even the most powerful alliances. And in that future, the Gripen E stood as a silent warning. As one senior officer admitted in private, "We underestimated them. We thought we knew the rules, but Sweden just changed the game." And so, in the wake of that fateful drill, the skies over Europe no longer felt the same. For the first time in decades, NATO's air dominance was in question. And the Gripen, the jet no one expected to rise so high, had done the unthinkable. It had shocked the world, and no one had seen it coming. The whispers did not fade with time. In fact, they grew louder. Months after the shocking drill, NATO intelligence officers still struggled to decode how Sweden's Gripen had done what it did. Reports were classified at the highest level, hidden from the public eye, but deep inside secure facilities. Sleepless analysts replayed the same frames of footage again and again, searching for a clue. What they found was even more disturbing. Evidence that the Gripen E might have gone beyond simple electronic warfare. Some believed the jet had tapped directly into NATO's command systems, rewriting data streams as if it had been inside the alliance's own brain. The thought sent shivers through the halls of Brussels. If true, it meant the Gripen wasn't just a fighter jet. It was a cyber weapon with wings. Suddenly, every NATO wargame, every strategy, every defense plan seemed fragile. After all, how could you fight an enemy who knew your moves before you even made them? Meanwhile, strange events began to surface. During an unrelated patrol in the Baltic Sea, a NATO surveillance aircraft suddenly experienced critical system malfunctions. Its radar went dark for 3 minutes, its communication scrambled, and when the systems returned, nothing seemed damaged. But the data recorded in that window was gone. Whispers linked the incident to a Gripen test flight, though no evidence could confirm it. Some called it coincidence, others called it a warning. In Washington, generals demanded answers from Sweden, but Stockholm offered only polite reassurances. Publicly, Sweden claimed the Gripen was simply cost-efficient and effective. Privately, however, sources hinted at something deeper, a project codenamed GhostNet, a fusion of AI, cyber warfare, and electronic deception. If such a system existed, it meant that the Gripen E could not only hide itself, but manipulate the very perception of reality in a battle. Fear spread inside NATO. What if this technology fell into the wrong hands? What if nations outside Europe, watching silently, were already trying to replicate it? The balance of power no longer seemed secure, and in quiet conversations, some officials admitted that NATO had been shaken to its core by a country it once underestimated. Yet the most haunting part was this: the Swedish Air Force had never revealed the Gripen's full capabilities. The drills, the exercises, the tests, they might have shown only a fraction of what the jet could truly do. If the Gripen could already blind radars, confuse systems, and humiliate NATO's elite pilots, then what secrets still lay hidden under its sleek frame? A chilling phrase began to circulate among NATO insiders. The Gripen doesn't just fight in the skies, it fights in the shadows. It was a reminder that the age of brute force and heavy firepower was fading. The wars of the future would be won by deception, speed, and control of information. And in that new age, Sweden's Phantom jet was already years ahead. As the Alliance prepared for its next moves, one thing became terrifyingly clear. NATO had been caught off guard once. It could not afford to be caught off guard again. Yet no matter how many simulations they ran, no matter how many countermeasures they planned, one truth haunted them all. Against the Gripen, there were still far too many questions, and far too few answers. The sky had changed, the rules had changed, and in the silence above the forests and icy waters of Sweden, a ghost was waiting.